Hello, my name is Justin Newsom, and for my presentation, I decided to go with the Controlled Substances Act. So, let's dive right in. So, what is the CSA? Well, the CSA serves as the legal foundation of the government's fight against drugs of abuse. This law consolidates numerous laws regulating the manufacture and distribution of narcotics, stimulants, depressants, hallucinogens, anabolic steroids, and chemicals used in the production of controlled substances. There were numerous issues being solved at the time of this bill's creation. The primary problem the bill was meant to solve, however, was to ensure that the U.S. met its obligations with two international treaties. Those treaties were the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs and the 1971 Convention on Psychotropic Substances. The bill thus set out a system for classifying substances in several schedules, in accordance with the binding scientific and medical findings of a public health authority, whether it be the Secretary of Health and Human Services or the World Health Organization. In order to solve this issue of compliance, there is a provision for automatic compliance with treaty obligations, which also establishes mechanisms for amending international drug control regulations to correspond with findings on scientific and medical issues. Alternative solutions to this scheduling method include a proposed system in the UK, which uses 9 categories of harm, of which alcohol and tobacco are included, and cannabis, LSD, and MDMA are listed as less harmful than both alcohol and tobacco. The Drug Enforcement Administration, or the DEA, is a combination of Customs Drugs agents and the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, BNDDD, and is the lead agency for the CSA. Proceedings to add, delete, or change the schedule of a substance or drug may be initiated by the DEA, and they may also begin an investigation of a drug at any time based on information received from laboratories, state and local law enforcement, and regulatory agencies. Now on to political obstacles. I would be lying if I said that the policy had a huge political wall it had to climb up, with no one beside it to support. The act was unanimously passed in the House and the Senate, receiving very little opposition from either party. At the time of its passage, there were very little compromises or negotiations made due to how universal its support was. The Act's lifespan in Congress was relatively short, with it being introduced in the House in September 10, 1970, and signed just over a month later by Richard Nixon on October 27th. Overall, the public, media, and interest groups played only a small role in the bill's passage. As prior there were numerous drug laws and no classifications, the bill's compliancy with health standards across the world allowed it to become very popular among the country. However, the influence of the bill on these three would later become quite tremendous. So, now on to the costs and benefits of this plan. First, let's assess the cost of this policy. In order to do so, one must look at the Drug Enforcement Administration, which was created with the sole purpose of enforcing this bill. First, critics of the DEA state that the agency is too harsh on some drugs and ignore the possible medical applications. One such highly contended drug is marijuana, as can be seen by state governments allowing medical and recreational marijuana use. The DEA itself is criticized for delaying rescheduling petitions of cannabis for years, overruling DEA administrative law judges, and systematically impeding scientific research of cannabis. One of the more direct costs is the monetary costs of the administration. According to the agency website, the total budget of the DEA from 1972 to 2014 was around $50 million. In 2013, the average cost per arrest was $90,000. The DEA has been criticized for too costly of arrests and enforcing policies and arrests that make the most money. For example, in 1984, a three-year DEA license for prescribers of medicine cost $25. In 2009, the fee for a 3-year license was $551. However, monetary costs are not limited to the DEA, but also the billions spent within the Justice Department that end up with the arrest of someone doing drugs. Lastly, the Act itself and the administration created are primarily criticized for their violations of civil liberties. Organizations such as the Cato Institute and the Drug Policy Alliance argue that anybody should be free to put any substance they choose into their own bodies for any reason, particularly when legal drugs such as alcohol, tobacco, and prescription drugs are also open to abuse, and that any harm caused by a drug user or addict to the general public is a case of conflicting civil rights. The benefits of the policy have already been mentioned previously, so I'll simply go through them lightly here. The CSA allows the federal government to comply with international treaties, and thus allows the U.S. to meet worldwide standards, establishes a national commission on marijuana and drug abuse so that cannabis use can be further studied in the United States. It consolidates drug laws and drug agencies so that now there is very little contention or confusion with legislation. Finally, it creates clear classifications with the scheduling system, in which drug danger levels are finally assessed on a federal level. In the end, everyone pays for the enforcement of the drug law through taxes. Some suffer the costs more than others, especially the users of drugs high on the schedules. However, the benefits go to everyone as well, since everyone benefits from the safety that the drug enforcement provides. The reason why the CSA still stands today after its passage 45 years ago was because it built a strong foundation for drug laws. Due to its large consolidation and classification system, it changed the entire U.S. drug policy. It is true, however, that America's stance on drugs has certainly become less stringent, and we encounter things that doesn't cover along the way. For example, the Act has been amended over 10 times over the years, with amendments concerning date rape, electronic prescriptions, anabolic steroids, and so on and so forth. In the future, reform will be needed for marijuana, as more and more doctors are confirming its medical uses. Perhaps the most crucial unintended consequence to come from this act was the influence that it had on the American people. This was the first time that drugs, besides alcohol or tobacco, were directly controlled by the federal government, and not through taxes. Thus was the start of America's war on drugs that would hit its peak during the Reagan years. The CSA was its start, and we have yet to see its end.